The problem with your argument is you don't seem to admit that carbon dioxide creates global climate change, and that what we need to do is focus on man-made CO2. You just want to ignore the effect of CO2 in our atmosphere.
And that's a good question, because oftentimes people will say, well, obviously you're an idiot. Everyone knows carbon dioxide is a greenhouse gas. So how can you say it's not causing global warming? But that's not really getting the issue right or getting the debate right. Most scientists on both sides of the issue agree that, well, pretty much all scientists agree that carbon dioxide is a greenhouse gas. Scientists differ whether over that has caused a substantial or even any part of the warming that occurred during the 20th century. Scientists know as a matter of physics that the amount of carbon dioxide that was in the Earth's atmosphere prior to the Industrial Revolution, if you fully doubled that and all other factors were equal, so you're only accounting for carbon dioxide, the Earth's temperature would rise 1.1 degrees Celsius. No matter what side of the global warming debate you're on, that's a matter of physics that scientists agree on. Now, just as a matter of a context and reference, since the dawn of the Industrial Revolution to today, the atmospheric carbon dioxide content has only risen by 40%. We're nowhere near doubling it. So then how do we get these projections of 3 degrees Celsius warming in the next century? It's because the computer models that are programmed to predict this, they are based upon, they get most of their warming not from carbon dioxide, which is a greenhouse gas, but is a fairly minimal greenhouse gas. But they say you get a little bit of carbon dioxide warming, and that's going to cause separate but related warming from other factors that will significantly enhance the carbon dioxide warming. Carbon dioxide itself is not that significant a warming factor. Now, interestingly enough, scientists have tested these quote-unquote positive feedback loops, the other factors that are supposed to increase global warming exponentially above and beyond carbon dioxide. The two most significant in the computer models. The computer models are programmed to assume that a little bit of carbon dioxide warming will lead to a significant amount of relative humidity increase. Water vapor is a far more potent greenhouse gas than carbon dioxide. So if that were true, that you'd then get more water vapor in the atmosphere, then yes, you would have more significant warming. The second factor that the computer models are programmed with is to assume that that increase in atmospheric humidity will take the form of upper-level cirrus clouds. Upper-level cirrus clouds are very thin. They let sunlight come down, so you get the heat coming into the Earth's surface, but they trap heat from going back into space. Now, if, by contrast, that extra humidity took the form of low-level rain clouds that would block sunlight, that would be a cooling factor. So the two main factors are, for the exponential increase in warming, one, an increase in relative humidity, two, an increase in cirrus clouds. In the real world, scientists have studied that, and what they've determined is that in the real world, as carbon dioxide's increased, as we've had a little bit of global warming from that, rather than having the two positive feedback loops, both relative humidity and cirrus clouds are actually declining. So the computer models are based on erroneous assumptions that have been contradicted by real-world data. That's why we're not facing a crisis.
Bring this in terms that I can understand. Put it
you
on
can't understand that?
No, I can't understand that. Bring it to a bumper sticker for me. Does CO2 cause global warming?
In a very minor way, yes. Very minor way. Not in a way that is at all alarming.
Does man-made CO2, carbon emissions, cause global warming?
Same answer.
How small of a level? Let me try it a different way. If man didn't exist in the last 200 years, how much different would our climate be?
And this is a question that scientists on both sides of the issue, all sides of the issue, they have disputes even among themselves, even among allies. But the best science that's out there indicates that probably of the 0.6 degrees Celsius warming that occurred in the 20th century, perhaps 0.1, maybe 0.2 degrees Celsius of warming. So maybe a quarter or less.
All right.
Very small.
Bring it here. We've only got about 5 minutes left, so let me roll this up. Isn't it safe to say that even if you're wrong, we're dealing with such big issues here, we're dealing with such an incredible issue that could destroy our world, that we need to take these precautions? Whether or not you're right or wrong, we need to do what so many enviros want to get done.
Two parts to my answer. First of all, even if the entire world enacted the Kyoto Protocol, which was an agreement among the world's industrialized nations to cut emissions. The U.S. was supposed to cut our emissions from 1990 levels. Even if the entire world abided by that agreement, regardless of what side of the science you're on in terms of the overall debate, how much warming would we mitigate over the next century? The answer is 0.14 degrees Celsius. In other words, a mere fraction of the warming that some people say will happen. We would have very minimal impact. Now, on the other hand, the costs are extremely severe. Here in Colorado, there's a group called Science Applications International Corporation. They work with the U.S. Energy Information Administration, or U.S. Energy Information Administration, yes, on their economic forecast and their economic modeling. They did a national analysis and state by state. Here in Colorado, typical global warming legislation would cost the state of Colorado 57,000 jobs. That's an increase in the state's unemployment rate.
When you say typical global warming legislation or regulation,
the Lieberman, what they did is they analyzed the Lieberman-Warner bill that was proposed last year in the U.S. Congress. It calls for a 70% reduction in greenhouse gases by 2050. By comparison, Barack Obama is calling for an 80% reduction by 2050. So this is not as severe as Barack Obama's plan. But according to the Lieberman-Warner bill, what you're looking at is an increase in Colorado's unemployment rate by 2%.
Because what? What does it call for? I know we're really tight on time.
Because it
what kind of things?
forces
Give me
people.
something concrete.
It forces people to get away from inexpensive, efficient coal power and instead to purchase their power from more inefficient, expensive sources. You would have a decline in annual household spending power of between $4,000 and $7,000.
Because we'd be spending so much more for our electricity.
For the same goods and services we get now more cheaply from coal. We'd be seeing a decline in the state's gross domestic product each year by 2+%. In other words, today if we have growth, an annual growth rate of 2–2.5%, it's considered a fairly good economic year. If we enact these types of restrictions on carbon dioxide, if we had utter stagnation year after year, that'd be considered pretty good compared to when we have a downturn, it'd be even worse.
Here in Colorado, something like 70 to 80% of our electricity is made by coal. It's reliable, it's plentiful, it doesn't come from foreign sources. That's beginning to change. That is, the regulatory aspect is so that it's getting harder to build new coal-fired plants. One of our members of the PUC here, the Public Utilities Commission, said that there will be no coal plants in Colorado. How bad is coal?
Coal's not nearly as bad as the environmental activist groups would lead you to believe. There has been a tremendous increase in technology that makes coal cleaner to burn, to turn into electricity. You have scrubbers. To put it in terms that people can understand the real world, since 1970, EPA tracks 6 principal pollutants. Since 1970, we have less than half the pollution in our skies that we did in 1970. Laws and regulations already in the books mandate that we're going to have another 70% decrease in our air pollution in the next decade or so. This is because coal, gasoline, these fossil fuels, we are able to burn them and turn the energy and turn them into energy much more efficiently.
So coal's getting cleaner and cleaner and cleaner and cleaner.
It's not a bad guy at all.
Does those 7 pollutants include carbon dioxide?
And that's really the only issue that people can say, well, we haven't seen a decline in this. No, it doesn't include carbon dioxide because carbon dioxide has never been considered a pollutant by EPA. Now people are trying to push them to now designate it a pollutant. In fact, now this is the issue in front of EPA right now, and they say we're going to do it. But the fact of the matter is coal, for clean air, for all intents and purposes, is a very efficient and not too bad environmentally.
People want to get more information. They want a layman's guide to these issues. Where do they go? What's the best source?
If you want to go for global warming science, go to icecap.us. That's by meteorologist Joe DeLeo. Fantastic.
Icecap.us.
Right, and he puts it in layman's terms. Watts up with that, W-A-T-T-S. That's Anthony Watts. He's a meteorologist. He also brings the science down.
Heartland Institute, which is heartland.org. James, thank you for joining us. Thank you for watching. Tell a friend, and we'll see you next week.
Bamboozle, nuka, noozle, bippity, bop, she-call. You jibber jab, bamboozle, nuka, noozle, bippity, bop, she-call. I mean, you keep on talking, but you don't know where to turn it off. The day I met you, wish I'd been in Paris.